Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's keynote with Malick Bauer. My name is Sonia Donaldson, and I am the Executive Director of Media and Archives for the BGHRA. I am especially honored to introduce Malick, whose role in the groundbreaking Disney Plus Hulu series, Sam is Saxon, has really opened up a space for us to explore the complexities and richness of Black German and diasporic experiences. And the series is based on the life of Samuel Mafire, and Malick's performance really deftly captures the nuances of quotidian life during an intense period in Germany, looking at xenophobia, anti-Black violence, German reunification, and other compelling matters that affect Black life. Last year, the BGHRA worked with the cast and production team of Sam is Saxon to launch the series' North American tour. We are honored to continue the work with Malick, who has been an integral part of conversations around art, identity, culture, and the politics of resistance. These discussions have moved us closer to what BGHRA founder and our fearless leader, Rosemary Pena, calls rekinning, the reunification of our Black diaspora family. Rekinning, as Pena notes, is integral to the BGHRA's founding vision. It is a reminder of the things that connect us and the work ahead in solidifying those connections. Finally, to quote Malick, the truth lies in the connection of the Afro-diaspora. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Malick Bauer. Welcome, Malick, and I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sonia. I'm very honored to speak here today to all you beautiful people. Yeah, as Sonia already said, we've built quite a nice relationship here with the BGHRA because I'm tremendously grateful for the work that you are doing. Work that is so extremely necessary, especially for us Black Germans over here in Germany, given that we have a very, I might say, special or unique experience. As you know, in America, of course, in France or England, there's a greater Black population than in Germany. Germany, of course, is as guilty as these other empires of colonial crimes. But after we lost the First World War, we had to relinquish our territories. Therefore, not really allowing and integrating our Black population into our society. Another one of the great crimes, of course, and problems that we have as a Black population is that then again, after the Second World War, Germany was a super, I might say, homogenous society due to the cruel and barbaric reign of the Nazi regime, basically casting aside or eradicating everything that is not part of the German narrative. After we then got liberated by the Americans, many soldiers, of course, Black again, that came over to Europe to free us from tyranny, only to face more obstacles when they had to return. Germany still did not allow for, I might say, a Black population. There were some people that were born here after the occupation and from relationships that basically gave us new life, from Black GI soldiers at times and white German women. And these babies then again were reported for very cynical reasons. I think some of them were a more agreeable climate, maybe in the US and whatnot. And then again, it was tough to build up numbers that then give us a stronger demographic participation in the society and therefore also a stronger voice. But not only in numbers do I feel like this was a great loss. The topic of this year's conference is joy and pain. One of the greatest pains, I believe, in what I've just been describing is the loss of knowledge of self, the loss of identity and storytelling. Because, as I said earlier, the Black experience was always interrupted. The chains of connection were always broken in a way that I feel every generation always in some type of way has to, I might say, restart. Of course, there has been tremendous groundwork. I wouldn't even be able to sit here and talk to you beautiful people without a lot of trailblazers that have even opened the door for me now to be seen on screen, for me now to get that visibility. I'm not trying to diminish their contribution, but I still feel that if we, for example, would have had people that are now in their 60s and 70s from these relationships of Black GI soldiers and white women, opening the door, giving us guidance, we could be further ahead. And through meeting Rosemary, of the BGHRA, and also reading her dissertation called The Rekinning, I was very happy to also learn about that generation of people from a deeper perspective. One of my most fiercest and most important collaborators, or probably the most important collaborator, is a lady named Laura Dabestein. Her herself, now in the second generation, being of American heritage. Her grandfather also was a Black GI who then, had a baby that is her mother, a woman that is mixed like myself. And that woman then again had her. But that loss in connection is a deep, deep problem. Another problem we face sometimes in Germany is, I might want to call it the German structure of society, where a bit of, in the Biedermeier sense, everybody is primarily focused on self, or more or less their own household, the unity within the household. But there's not much, I might say, connection even intended in the German society structure. When our old folks get older, we put them into the retirement communities, as opposed to maybe Italians who then go into these multiple story buildings and have Nana living upstairs or downstairs and keeping her integrated. And that directly, in the, I might call it, afro-German experience, is such a problem, I feel. Because if you have, on the one hand, a great loss in connection, a great loss in knowledge of self, because people were basically stripped away from the fabric of this country, and on the other hand, you have this more, I must say, focused on self approach that the Germans do have. It is very hard to get to that point that Rosemary so beautifully coined, the rekinning. But that is what we are here for today. I'm tremendously grateful again, because I feel we need to connect deeper. Of course, on a transatlantic scale, which is why I'm so happy to speak to you guys from overseas or different parts of the world, but also bridge that gap generationally, and I might say time-wise in the sense, getting knowledge from the elders, building that bridge again, so that our new generations now don't always have these problems that they are facing and that they seem so novel. There's been a lot of stuff thrown at us, no matter where we are in the world, that if we can get the knowledge of the prior generation, we can be much more efficient, much less emotional, and much more stable while navigating through these muddy waters. That much as an introduction. Apart from the problem that I sometimes feel with, or exists with, I might say, the German way of, let me call it selfishness, at times jealousy. In Germany, we call it Neidkultur, which would mean, as a direct translation, jealousy culture. We don't like people to soar too high. We don't like people to leave the nest too much. Otherwise, we would take them down a peg. That problem can greatly be countered by a sense of Africanness. A sense of Africanness in an appreciation for the elders, an appreciation for the knowledge of self. One part of, I might call it the pain that I faced during my youth was that I myself was a young man born to a German woman, my mother, and my father from the Ivory Coast, who I both love so very dearly. But their relationship didn't really function. My father came here as a student on a student visa. Then I was conceived, but after the studies were finished, his only chance of staying in Germany would have been to marry my mother. But at that point, the relationship didn't really allow for that anymore. So he had to go back to the Ivory Coast. At that point, I was left here in Germany with, I might say, substitute father figures in some uncles of mine who have been in the country still, but they were not around full time. I think many problems we face today are a part of a lack of leadership and guidance, not necessarily only male guidance, but guidance in general when it comes to Africanness. What that leads to is that I then was a young guy navigating Germany, having these weird experiences from time to time, and not really having anyone to counsel me through the encounters that I did have, where I sometimes felt that I was dealt with unfairly, where I sometimes felt that I was dealt with differently than my white friends that I grew up with. And then that, of course, opens the door for something that, of course, is a joy now that I'm sitting here, which is the discovery and I might say the search and or research for representation and for basically a reflection of my reality, which is why I came so, I might say, engulfed in American culture and more so hip hop culture. Something that is very similar in a sense, and it connected me deeply to the American brothers and sisters that I then watched or listened to so happily, was that loss of the African connection, of course, in America through the great crimes of the Mafia and the transatlantic slave atrocities. But they then defining their own self and finding their own culture and building themselves up outside of the descriptions of the white normative society. I felt that there always was a connection I had to them because I had lost my connection to Africa because I didn't have my father present. And they, of course, have lost it through the aforementioned tragedies and atrocities. And watching these people then always gave me a window into a reality of rebuilding oneself, building a structure, building a culture, and enjoying watching these people then made me gravitate to the language of English, of course. I believe like from the age of 11 or 12, I started watching English versions of movies exclusively because I could always feel that there was this weird thing that the Germans did with the dubbing. They always kind of made the Black people seem to be ridiculous with these high-pitched voices, which were totally out of place at times, not necessarily only for comedic characters, but for all of them. Unnecessary yos and bros thrown into sentences that were not there to be found in the American English original version of the movies. And then I felt something that is, I might say, so fulfilling and so healing. And that was, of course, me finally finding representation and that question then maybe brings us back to our show, Sam Saxon. I said earlier that we have a much smaller Black demographic in Germany. And that, of course, gives us a smaller market share. In Germany, our TV stations are heavily subsidized. They are basically, I might say, a forced payment upon the consumer or upon the citizen. I think you have to pay about 18 to 20 bucks a month for the BGHRA, which is the broadcast conglomerate where you pay these, I might say, 20 bucks a month, and that then gets used to continue and produce program for the citizen in return through our great state subsidized broadcast channels. And Sam Saxon is a story that came to one of our producers and creators, Tyron Ricketts, by chance. Again, we're in the pain section of this. There were multiple racist murders happening in Germany. I might say, broadcasting or news broadcasting about it always sounded something similar to this. After a mutual disagreement and a scuffle, multiple skinheads murdered or killed a Black man by accident, period. Of course, these were not mutual squabbles or mutual problems or small fights that then escalated. Those were, of course, provoked attacks. If I happen to sit in a bus station and 6 or 7 neo-Nazis come up to me and provoke and or attack me, and I then somehow try to defend myself, that is not then now a mutual scuffle. It is a racist murder. But Germany always, based on our, of course, horrific past, tries to turn a blind eye to our racist crimes, still to this day. So a group of rappers, brothers keepers they were called, they made a song. It was called Adriano Letzte Warnung, Adriano Last Warning. Adriano was the name of a man who was also one of these racist murders. That song then gained huge popularity, was a great song, was a great signal. And they then thought that it would be best to go on a tour around East Germany to promote the idea of inclusivity, the idea of, I might say, one Germany that embraces all cultures and all skin colors. Well, when they set out to do that tour, they received death threats in return from Nazi groups. And these death threats then led to them needing security. And while they were then looking for security, they came in contact with the real Samuel Mefire. And Samuel then met the guys, and of course, Tyron was part of the group, and told them about his story. That must have been about 2001, maybe 2002. Then Tyron continued his career. He became an actor because he met our other creator of Sam Saxon, Jörg Winger. Jörg Winger made him one of the first German policemen in TV. I think he was the first Eastern German policeman on TV. And while shooting that show, it was called Leipzig Homicide, Aaron told Jörg about Samuel's story. And Jörg, being an inclusive storyteller, took a liking to it, and then they went on to their first trial of selling that show back then in 2005 with the idea of Tyron playing Samuel himself, because of course it is a great part and he wanted to advance his acting career. When that happened was very interesting, especially given that I just gave you the structure of the nation's broadcast channels. They are all heavily subsidized. When you pay them, you are not asked what race you are. You're just forced into payment, right? But of course, the people that sit at these broadcast channels back in 2005, and even still, were predominantly white. And their reaction to the story of Samuel Mefire was always kind of similar. It was something along the lines of, well, it sounds very interesting. It is a very dynamic story, and I do feel it is interesting, and it has its peaks and valleys, and it makes for a great dramatic show or movie. But who in Germany would want to see a black lead actor? Nah, we can't do it. I'm sorry, but better luck next time on the other channel stations and whatnot. So that then basically continued for about, I'm gonna say 15 to 20 years. They never got to make the show. It was always rejected by white subsidized broadcast channels that enforce payment by the whole population, but then decide that Black people are not part of the German narrative. Meanwhile, I fell in love with the craft of acting. I didn't know nothing about these circumstances at that point, of course, but I always felt that if I wanted to be an actor, I had to go internationally to have a full-fledged career that would allow for a full value and opportunity. Because when I saw Black people on screen in Germany, they were always, or often, mostly abused to further perpetuate the stereotypes about Black people, the tropes, and the cliches. They were not allowed full value careers like my American brothers and sisters, for example, that I watched so eagerly from my youth on. Like, of course, Denzel Washington, Forrest Whitaker, Will Smith, Don Cheadle, Viola Davis. I could go on and on. So I went to England first, not knowing anything about the craft. They rejected me, rightfully so, but they said that I was talented and I should come back. Well, in the meantime, I continued working, and I thought, well, maybe if there hasn't been great opportunity in Germany, someone has to, I might say, kick in the door or continue that battle, because something I want to make very clear as I'm speaking here today, I fully believe that there are not many places in this world as we live today that offer more opportunity and quality of living for Black people than Germany. Of course, we always have to announce when we talk about these things that there were pervasive interferences in Africa's development as a continent. And I don't want to let that slide under the table. But in the one reality that we do possess right now, Germany is definitely one of the best places for people that look like myself to live in. And that is just speaking geographically, but also historically. Within the last, I might say, 500 years or so, there weren't many spaces in the world that were better for people that look like myself. And therefore, I then went into battle with the German system. I studied in Leipzig, and in the theater realm, I was very blessed. I studied from 2015 to 2019. While I was studying, I was very well respected in the theater realm, but in the camera realm of things, where you get the real visibility, where you get, of course, a different reach into society, there was still only cliche office. Then, back to that transatlantic interconnection, the great martyr that is George Floyd and his dramatic and devastating loss has happened. And the Black Lives Matter movement then basically reached the German shores, and its tremendous impact finally opened up the dialogue of anti-Black racism in Germany. Of course, Germany has done a good job in addressing its horrific crimes against the Jewish community during the Shoah. But as I always like to say, every empire only admits to one shame. Our Germany's shame is, of course, the Third Reich and the attempted eradication of the beautiful Jewish people. But therefore, we never really addressed our colonial past. In the 1920s, Germany and the Herero and Marmara regions already had concentration camps. But as I said earlier, we had to give that up. But then the Shoah happened, and how can I say this properly? everything else then became second fiddle. But Black Lives Matter, an American movement, shook up the world and especially Germany. So then it was 2020. In the meantime, I had met Tyron Ricketts. He told me that I looked kind of similar to the real Zaman Mafia. I got to audition, I got the part, but there was no money and no partners for the show yet to be made in 2019. That then drastically changed in 2020. The world was talking more about equity, inclusion, and diversity. And even though now today, 4 years later, some of it has been at times performative, a lot of ground was made and a lot of improvements were made to the landscape of German television as well. So now I must say, agreeable offers came in. Also, Tyron and Jörg, with the help of Chris Zilber, one of our other great creators, the three of them basically made the show together. They managed to find interest in the show all of a sudden. The show that has been in their cupboard for about 15, 16 years at that point finally got some interest. Then Disney came and bought it, and they gave us their trust. But again, there is no me talking to you here without great American Black people that propelled the movement into the world, which of course was rooted in pain, but it gives me the joy of speaking to you right now. And as you can see, it is all related. And one of the great quotes by my, I might say, indirect mentor, Denzel Washington, is, "Luck is when preparation meets opportunity." I did my work in a world preparing for an opportunity like this, where there were no opportunities like this, but I tried to pray and hope that things might change, and they did. But only through the transatlantic power of the American Black pain and resiliency, the topic of anti-Black racism finally rose in Germany. And then we did the show. I, of course, got to meet the great Rosemary Pena, and I'm here. I'm here speaking to you. She taught me a lot about the Rekinning. I can only thank you for your tremendous work and strength and valor throughout your life's journey. I might keep it at that because I don't want to infringe on your privacy. And I do believe we need more of that. I do believe we need more Pan-African thinking in our Black diaspora. Sometimes when I see discourse around that exact topic, I then see pain again. I see pain from the American brothers and sisters that feel abandoned at times by the African leaders and or the African leaders of the past. And I see I might say, allegations of Black people having surrendered them into slavery, not coming to save them and whatnot. And I see a lot of intergenerational pain, but I can only ask and pray for an understanding of the value in a connected future. I feel Ghana, for example, has made great strides with their whole door of return movement and allowing people, Black Americans and other Black Africans, easy entry into the country. I feel that is necessary for us to understand that there is an extreme value in interconnecting again, and therefore also moving way past the tired old, I might say, slavery narrative. Not to diminish the pain or the trauma, that is not my attempt here, but to think about what we were, or basically what the American brothers and sisters were before they became slaves. There was a lot of culture there. There still is a lot of culture there. And to step away again from being described by the white normative narrative and step into our own authorship of our reality and our identity more than anything else. And that, I feel, is one of the greatest joys in my life. Getting to meet people back then through screen that gave me representation, hope, and inspiration. And now trying to, I might say, advance the German media game with the help of people that came before me, but now also carrying the torch, or a baton, I like to say. As I said earlier, I don't feel geographically right now there are many places that are better in totality than Germany. And historically, I don't feel that there ever was a better time for people that look like myself than right now. But then again, we all know that there is so much lost or hidden history and atrocities. If I think about Tulsa, if I think about Black Wall Street, where whenever Black people in America made great strides and built great communities, these riots then destroyed the many, many accomplishments. But then again, the only way to combat that sense of desperation and hopelessness is in education and knowledge of self and knowledge of history. And yeah, therefore, I love the coin that Rosemary gave us as the next generation of the rekinning. And I hope we can do that transatlantically, again, geographically, but also intergenerationally, and get the knowledge that we need in today's society and not be flabbergasted. When the microaggressions come, we know how to judge them, and we know how to maneuver, and we know how to keep it smooth and not be kicked off balance, but to stay on course. And therefore, I'm now passing it over to you, beautiful, beautiful people behind the screen. Can't wait for some questions. And yeah, I'm very grateful to speak to you today. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Malick. You've given us a lot to sit with and think through. And in particular, I want to thank you for the really wonderful historicization of a Black German context, and to think about the colonial enterprise and empire and its connection to sort of contemporary sort of neo-colonialism and how that functions. I'm particularly struck by how you are oriented to loss, right? And to think about that loss in relation to history and Black community. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about how you see rekinning functioning for you specifically, and then how you see that in the work that you do, and then the possibilities that it holds for particularly as an artist and in terms of Black art. What can you imagine or think about rekinning in connection to art?
Well, I might start with the first part of the question where you talked about how it was for myself. I will give you one anecdote. I was in acting school pretty much 2018. I was within the last few years of my studies. And as I said earlier, my father had to leave the country after finishing his studies, which was basically when I was about 6 or 7 years old. He then sadly passed away at quite a young age, but he left me with 2 siblings. The younger sister I had, Malika, she sadly passed away too when I was young. Oh, thank you very much. But you know, when you lose people, you gain angels. That's how I like to look at it. So when she passed, I had a brother left. And then it was 2018, it was the World Cup, and I had one of these routine phone calls with one of my uncles where you basically barrage down the typical questions: how you doing, how's your mother, how's your sister, blah blah blah. And then I asked how my brother was doing, and then he basically pulled him into the screen. You know, it was a time of video call in 2018. And I then got to see my little brother again. I then booked a ticket to the Ivory Coast to rekin with him, because there was always, given that you're speaking about a certain sense of loss, there was always this weird pain blocking me from really reaching out to my African family, because at times I felt abandoned. Abandoned, of course, by my father in some way, you know, and then also by the rest of the family, in the sense of there are so many people that do quite well in that family. And I then sometimes didn't understand why there was not a more aggressive approach of maybe getting me over there at times and whatnot. But then when I saw my younger brother, again, when we think about Africanness and the relationship of responsibility in the age question, I felt that he was now my responsibility. And even though I had questions for some uncles and aunties that were based in pain, they were not necessarily based in truth, but based in pain. I could overcome that for him. So I went to Africa, and it was very funny. When I came back from Africa, I felt so whole because I learned so much. I was there for like 4 weeks or something, but still, having spent time there properly. The last time I had been there was for my father's funeral in 2007. 11 years later, now as a man, it gave me a very different understanding of myself, and it gave me much more, I might say, liberation also as an actor and as an artist. And when I came back from Africa, like I all of a sudden pretty much became top of my class, because as an actor, of course, you play from within, you offer certain parts of yourself. And now that I had at least kind of answered some questions about myself, I feel like I could give the audience more of myself. And that was one of the great benefits, of course. So now to get over to that relationship, now to being an artist and the value of the rekinning, I could say, as I said earlier, reconnecting my African heritage and lineage into my identity made me more whole, gave me a different understanding. It also gave me a very different understanding of the situation over there. As I said earlier, some of my family is well-to-do, some of my family is not. What that means is that you now all of a sudden understand things differently. I don't ever want to diminish the great advancements we made in political thought and speech and language, especially within the last 4 to 5 years. But I sometimes feel that with the advancements in identity politics, there's an open invitation into victimhood that one has to fiercely reject at times, which is why I always like to offer the question, where is it better and when has it been better? Not in the sense of saying that it is now good or that everything is now perfect, but more to empower our generation now to understand the sacrifice and also the obstacles the generations before us faced, and also certain cousins of ours from other parts of the world still currently face. Like my life, I feel, is much more relatable or close in identity or reality to that of a white man than it is to one of a brother in Africa who lives without social security, who lives without a healthcare system, without these systems that are in place, right? So at times I want our people to understand that even though some of us, especially the American brothers and sisters, didn't necessarily choose where they live, they benefit indirectly also from systems and that these systems are not necessarily fair or anything, but they give us a leg up and an opportunity to combat certain systems. So as an artist now, what I've been trying to do up to now is only play strong characters. Like I might say economically, I suffered a bit while I was going through my theater part of my career, the part of my career that was more so based in theater, because I just firmly rejected all these stupid stereotype type of roles. I didn't want to aid in the white fantasies of Black identity. Now that I'm, of course, blessed to be in a different position, I now have to also use the momentum to create more, I might say, productive visibility, productive projects and narratives around our identity. And I feel that is the best answer I can give right now. Just so that make it too long. But...
Yeah. No, I really like this idea of productive visibility, right? Because I think for so long we've been focused on visibility and haven't necessarily considered how we are being presented. So when you were talking about dubbing, for example, it really struck me, and I think gets to the core of some of what you're talking about in terms of identity formation, and how we are understood, but also how we come to understand ourselves through these forms of visibility that don't necessarily see our full humanity. So I like this term of productive visibility that you're working with. In terms of art, I'm going to go out to the audience to take a question, and this one's from Kavina, who says, "Thank you for your wonderful keynote, Malick. Last year's public statement about anti-Black films at the Berlinale by the collective of Afro-German film creatives was a telling update that all is not well in the German film industry. In your mind, what are the biggest challenges and what still needs to happen for racial diversity in the German film industry to be less problematic?"
That's a great question. Thank you very much for that question, first and foremost. What I feel is, if you do remember when I talked about our broadcast channel systems, I talked about how the money is basically an enforced payment, but then there is no representation of society when it comes to the decision makers, right? So if all of society, no matter what you look like, has to pay, but then at the end, there are some people who come from the norm deciding on what is worthy of funding, because all movies have to get funded somehow, some way, right? To even be made, what is worthy of broadcasting and whatnot. You run into big problems. The great thing about Sam Saxon, for example, was that we had diversity in front of, but also even more importantly, behind the camera. What that means is that when you then play a scene that doesn't abide maybe to the white ideas of psychology, but it has a different intensity, that you have people that can now rally for it. There was one scene in Sam Saxon, for example, where my character just barely survived the racist attack. And then he gets into a conversation with his white girlfriend, and it wasn't so nice. And I wasn't so docile as they sometimes want us, right? And then there were people feeling like I was, as a character, maybe risking the crowds or the audience's sympathy. And then there were people who then, of course, behind the camera, like Sulin, our great Kurdish director, could explain to them, no, from his emotional reality, he's so hurt at this moment in time that he has the emotional justification to maybe not be as sweet-tongued as you might like him right now. And this is just a small example, but again, even bigger structurally, I think we need, as Germany, as a society, we currently have about 25 to 30% people with migration backgrounds as in our population. But the decision makers often, or the judges when it comes to certain prizes or whatnot, they still look pretty much like there are no POCs in this country, which is not true at all. And we need that representation in front of and also behind the camera. But something that might not be the most popular statement that I didn't necessarily agree with when it came to the protests with the last year's Berlinale was, again, the understanding of, I might say, progress. One of the movies that I myself didn't like, right? I didn't agree with most of the movie was Last Graumes Vermessener Mensch. It was a movie about German colonial history. And of course, it was from a white perspective. It was through the white gaze, right? But also, it finally was an acknowledgement of what happened there on a pretty major media scale. It finally gave some material to teachers to bring that topic up in school.
Mm-hmm.
And it was by no means perfect, but I always say it like this: we get no Django Unchained without 12 Years a Slave or Glory or The Color Purple, right? So he made that movie, and the lead actress was a lady that is also of Nama or Herero heritage. I'm not too sure right now, I'm sorry. And she said it the best, I feel. She said, well, this movie is not perfect, but it finally brings the topic to the table so that now we can make our own movie.
Mm-hmm.
And even though, of course, I might say, celebrate the movie, I liked the visibility for the topic, even though I must agree that there was a lot of things that were, I might say, not ideal with the movie. But I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. There always has to be progress, right? And this is also where it becomes so tricky at times, because all of us, like I describe myself, I got my media material from outside of Germany because I was rarely served, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you watch all this progressive and media from other markets, and that now becomes your taste level. When you then see a German movie trying to tackle that subject, finally, it was very unsatisfying. I totally agree. But I still feel for the media market of Germany, it was a productive movie for finally bringing up that subject, if you can follow me.
Gotcha.
So,
So
yeah, the structure.
productive.
We need to
Sorry.
have, no, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have the same reality, especially when it comes to enforced subsidized broadcast channels. We need to have the board seats look similar to our society.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much the main thing, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So productive visibility then, not just in terms of people, but also in terms of concepts, ideas, and histories. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it's just something entirely different when you work with people who share their life experience behind the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Because the project that I've worked on, some of them were made up like that. Some of them were exclusively white almost behind the camera. And then you always run into that little something that we are probably also familiar with, that whatever we do, whatever function that we try to achieve in a job, we always have to give that little free consulting job on the side, if you know what I'm saying. Like, you're in the job trying to do the job, but given that you want to create, or that I want to create productive visibility, I then have to pretty much not necessarily rewrite the scripts, but at times I do. And I don't get paid for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I know I want to create a legacy for also my children to watch their father later on, and also for the children of right now that are not my direct children to see what we can be.
Mm-hmm.
And then at times they take your idea, then they find you annoying. But after taking your idea and get praise for the idea, they claim it as their own. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's bullshit, right? But I prefer that bullshit to not being able to work at all, like the great talented brothers and sisters from generations prior.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Gotcha. So in speaking about the younger generation and their context, and particularly a younger generation of artists, Can you talk a little bit about how you see your role in relation to them? And I want to take that up with a question from the audience from Courtney, who says, how do you feel your experience in Germany as a Black actor has differed from if you decided to act as a Black actor in America? Do you see yourself as a trailblazer in the space for Black actors in Germany?
I might answer it like this. Thank you for the great question again.
Mhm.
Um, I always say it like this. Sam Jackson, sadly, was the first show of that magnitude and or budget with a Black lead. I say sadly because I feel like we have had talent over here that was owed similar opportunity. People like Michael Plummer, Theodor Vonya Michael, even Taron Ricketts himself, sisters like Lara Sophie Milagro. There are so many great and talented people, but as I said earlier, and that is not fiction or me overblowing it, this project has been rejected for 20 years. So I am a trailblazer, not by choice or partly by choice, but also just by pure fact. And me trailblazing I was only able to do that because there was Black Lives Matter as a movement, and also there was the second great change in the media market were the streamers, who then come, of course, from American companies, and they then look for stories that have potential to function and or work or gain an audience worldwide, right? So these two, I might say, dynamic changes in the reality of the market made me even be able to become a trailblazer.
Mm.
The part of trailblazing that I did myself was offering work and going into probably the best or one of the best acting schools and preparing myself and praying for opportunity to arise at a time where it didn't look like that at all. When I went into acting school in 2015, the media market basically was only white. And when they gave representation to people of color, they only gave it to them in the narratives that they like to describe us in. Not us doing our own shows, but they doing shows about us pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the younger artists, I always want to remind them, as I said earlier, please, please, please have gratitude and move with humility when it comes to these times now. Because I might say societal change is always like a tug of war. And now with the new gains in language and identity politics, we now have new expectations and I might say a new arsenal of weaponry to combat for a better position. Mm-hmm. But there has to be a certain amount of humor as well and relentlessness when it comes to that tug of war. We cannot just drop the rope. Mm-hmm. And we cannot just declare everybody a Nazi simply because, of course, there are at times deep lacks in awareness. In America, like, to be very honest right now, I'm blessed enough to have found an American manager who has by chance seen Sam Saxon. And let me say this, even right now, mm-hmm. I get more interesting roles and or self-tape opportunities from America than I do in Germany. Because in America, the idea of a Black person being an artist is not foreign. In Germany, I'm still such a novelty. Like I've had horrible experiences where people at award shows, I will leave them unnamed because that's me keeping my humor. After nominating me, then basically told me in more words that I had such great presence and so much charisma, but they didn't feel that they could award me because with me it is natural. That is stuff that happens to me right now in Germany, where I carry a show for 7 episodes and then also other people from the industry say, yeah, but the part was so tailored to you.
Mm.
And I wonder, how can a biopic based on true events from 30 years ago be tailored to me?
Mhm.
And given that the role and the journey of the character is so dynamic, what part was tailored to me? The hero part, the anti-hero part, the villain part, the redemption arc. I could not encompass all of that in the same time, right? But people have a hard time in Germany seeing the artistry
Mhm.
before the skin color. In America, that is very different.
Mhm.
You are just ahead when it comes to that.
Mhm.
So that is, of course, the stuff that I still face, but
Right.
it would be naive to think that everything just switches overnight, right?
Right, absolutely. So what was the broad reception of the series like in Germany?
Mm. Well,
Was
it was very well received by critics as well.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, something that was so interesting to me, when the trailer was released, Germany then showed its ugly side again.
Mhm.
Because Samuel Mefire, you have to understand, the story starts with the racist murder of his father. Samuel Mefire's father is murdered by people for basically procreating with Samuel Mefire's mother.
Mhm.
He then passes from poisoning on the day of Samuel's birth. When you watch the show, that might seem fabricated, but it sadly is not.
Sure.
But Samuel Mefire then grows up and wants to offer himself in service to the country and say, I'm German. I want to be a policeman. I want to protect and serve in the best possible way. That makes him a hero to me, right? And then there's this one line in the trailer where it says, I'm not a foreigner, I am German. And then after basically the trailer went online, you could see hundreds of comments that are now all have been deleted, which I don't like. I would like them to be
Mm.
visible, but they deleted them, of people basically mocking that statement and saying, ah, he will never be German, he will never be German. But how can anyone be more German? The racist narrative, the racist poison of Hitler, Goebbels, and his terrible regime still have a grip on some people here in Germany. You cannot unleash radical thoughts like that and expect them to just dissipate.
Mhm.
But imagine someone who has lost his father to that train of thought, then still offering himself to the country,
Mhm.
but then still never finding acceptance from some people.
Mhm.
And that is also part of the reception of the show. Like when before we even were online, there were people giving us 0 stars or 1 star on IMDb because people have a problem with this show being made.
Mhm.
Like you encounter resistance,
Mhm.
but I do really believe that resistance is only there to test
Mhm.
your conviction. So we keep
Mhm.
pushing.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to switch to an audience question again from Kavina, who I'm so happy this question is being asked. In the film, beautiful short film, Danke, you play a character who falls in love with a Black woman, a dark-skinned Black woman, and this experience seems to be a racial awakening for your character. It radicalizes him a bit since he's only dated white women before, and his friend refuses to date Black women altogether. And she says, I find the short film a well-made representation of what my friends in Germany tell me the dating scene is like, was for them for some time. How important was it for you to be a part of this film? And what are the effects of colorism in the Black community, Black film acting community today? This is a great question. I mean, I have to interject and say, great question. Beautiful film, if you
Yeah, thank
haven't
you very
seen it.
much. I just want to put down the notes and then I'm going to get to answering. Well,
Sure.
you have to understand, Danke, we made that film with basically a creative powerhouse. His name is Emmanuel Amwako Jansen or Penned House. We made that film based on a short story from a beautiful in thought and in appearance, of course, both dark-skinned sister Ella Isian. She wrote a short story and he basically flipped that into a whole script and he shot it. He was the DOP or cameraman. He was the director. He edited it. Like he was amazing. And I got to act in it. And that scene is pretty much improvised based on topics that we put in there that are all things that you just described in your beautiful question. But we did that in 2019 in the summer, pre-2020. But we then released it basically to combat the imagery of our Black brothers and sisters going through hell over in America, and that then being force-fed down all of our throats during the Black Lives Matter movement, whether it was Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd himself, of course, and all the other people that suffered, Sandra Bland. All these things, all these videos then basically got fed into the algorithm. And we were like, well, let's just put something beautiful and poetic out, because we had made that movie and we hadn't released it yet, because we were, to be very honest, pretty much clueless about the German short film circuit. So we basically gave it to the culture as a counter, because it encompasses all that. It is an homage to the Black woman, and also telling tale of the reality of Black German dating life in Germany. And what I felt you understood so beautifully is that the part that I'm playing is also someone who kind of compensates or overcompensates the moment he meets that Black woman. And what was so funny is that that was really happening in 2020 when we released that movie 1 year later, a lot. Like, there were many people having a great Black awakening during the Black Lives Matter movement. But that's not when we shot it. We actually shot it 1 year earlier. And that is a real reality when it comes to colorism. I might say in the dating marketplace, or however I want to call it, given that there is a smaller Black demographic, right? And Black people don't, I might say, or aren't made to be a fabric of the German narrative at times. Colorism is even steeper and even more, I might say, dangerous over here. Because I myself, I'm a mixed guy, light skin, whatever you want to call it, and I have more proximity to whiteness. I live a very much more privileged life than the dark-skinned brother in that movie, who is even more radically against dating Black women. And we put that in there to show his own pain experiences from being dark-skinned, and him then rejecting the idea even more harshly of dating a Black dark-skinned woman than my character. Maybe my character is only open to dating that dark-skinned beautiful sister because he hasn't faced the same amount of abuse and no problems as the dark-skinned brother, right? And that is something that we played with. There were multiple layers in that movie. Of course, it was, I might say on first hand, it was an homage to the Black woman, but also on second hand, it is a commentary on, I might say, Black pain and or self-rejection, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. I actually really love this film, and I was struck by the use of language in the film, the way you both moved between German and African American vernacular English. And I'm wondering if you can talk about the kind of work that you see that movement doing in the film. Why that choice?
I think it was so important to us to do it this way, to also honor what I said earlier. A lot of Black German identity is based in African American identity, which is totally weird and pervasive, but I feel like it comes from that hole that I described earlier, that hole of knowledge of self. Like, I didn't, or I wasn't brought up through all the cultural differences and minute, I might say, specifications of my Ivorian heritage, right? But I then designed myself by pretty much looking for role models. These role models then spoke American English. Their music influenced my life, influenced my choices, and inspired me. So that whole movie has so many layers to it, and it's so beautiful to talk to people who can appreciate them. But none of that is by accident or whatever. I have to remember, like, I fired an old agent because they didn't understand it. They basically tried to downplay it, of course, a white agent. And they tried to downplay it when we came to them, or I came to them and wanted to get knowledge on the short film circuit. But the movie was actually ahead of its time.
Yeah.
I sometimes still feel I don't know if it's possible because it's been released or whatnot, but I sometimes still feel that it should be, maybe we should do something with it again because the appreciation for the movie grows as time goes on.
Right.
Because people now are only catching up.
Right. And it's
But
such
that was really one of them. Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry, but it was really from the FUBU thought, like for us, by us.
bias. Right.
It was not meant to be understood by, I might say, the white society. We didn't take any time to explain stuff, but we knew that there are people out there in the world, again, the thought of beginning, right, that would get it.
Yeah. And what I found really interesting about the film is the way that that conversation on the stoop could just as easily have happened on the stoops in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
That there's a similar kind of discourse that is also at play in the US around identity and one's relationship to Blackness, to colorism. That seems to be, or not seems to be, but puts us in this sort of diasporic link, if you will, right? Not necessarily a one-to-one correlation, but certainly the connection is there.
But it actually was very much intended because now, like Emmanuel, when we did the movie, like we were watching Spike Lee films heavily.
Aha, yeah.
So it's all connected, as we are all connected, right? But man, I really appreciate these questions because I still feel that movie needs to get its just due. But when we did it, we were basically, I just came fresh out of acting school and like, but yeah, thank you very much for the appreciation for that piece.
Thank you. Let's go to Spencer, who asked a question about Sam, a Saxon. It's beautiful. And talks about the way that it stresses the stressors, sorry, of interracial relationships within the context of German culture. And it looked as if the woman didn't understand. Do you think the majority of the US and German audience understood what you were trying to convey? And what was the feedback?
Well, what I love so much about the movie is, or the series, is that it plays in a time where we didn't have all these new bridges of language, like the word, for example, microaggressions, or all these new terms that are so necessary to communicate, especially interracially, right? But the show, it delved so deeply into that pain of his experience, and then at times maybe only wanting to be hugged, maybe only wanting to be seen, but then her inability to see him and also his inability to communicate. And that made for a great tragedy, of course. And at one point, our great director, Celine Youssef, she said something, because Louisa von Fink also played it so beautifully. She said, it seems like if they were together now in the 2020s, they would be a perfect couple because they're both very hard-headed and strong-minded. But there's that loss of connection and loss of dialogue there, right? So how the audiences understood it, well, I can say something. We did, also thanks to the BGHRA, that great educational tour in America, and something that was very striking to me was that the show is much better understood or wholly understood just from a consciousness perspective in America than it is here. Like these type of questions, or there's a level of questioning that is happening from American audiences that is not necessarily happening from German audiences, because I did screenings in both countries, right? And given that these things are not really novelties in America, people are more trained as an audience to understand what a scene tries to convey at this point, right? In Germany, as I said earlier, even within the own channel, people thought he was too rude to her at times. In America, people understood that if you just go through a life-threatening experience, you might not be, I might say, the most even keeled.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I feel maybe in America the series is understood better, but
Mm-hmm.
at times I feel we kind of like also Sam needs another maybe promotional push or something in America or something, because it's funny, like these two pieces of art, they are so universal to the Black experience.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, you did do, or we did do trailblazing work with the series and the movie Danke in Germany.
Right.
But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily gets its full respect at times. Let me say that.
Right. 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 Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about, the sort of response, the difference in responses. And I'm assuming, maybe wrongly, that the audience in Germany is predominantly white, for screenings, whereas the US audience might be a bit different. Or did you find similarities in audience?
Well, I'm to be very honest here and to keep the answers short. I don't have numbers.
Okay.
It would be highly speculative
Hmm.
at this point. But what I can
Okay.
say, of course, is that the German Black demographic is much smaller than the
Smaller.
American demographic.
Hmm.
So if there were 100 or 1 million or whatever views in America, or millions, I don't know, then there is a higher likelihood of that percentage being bigger of Black people than in,
Right,
right?
right. I guess I'm wondering about how Black Germans have received the series,
Mm.
what they've expressed.
Well, from what is reaching me, there's been a lot of love and admiration, right?
Mhm.
And I'm super grateful for that. And people basically announcing their inspiration. And what I always wanted to accomplish with the show for myself was delivering proof of concept that great stories are
Mhm.
universal, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, given that we did the show, things are not such a novelty anymore, you know? Again, to that word, trailblazing. When I looked for inspiration, I had to look outside of Germany 10 years ago. Now I hope that there are youngsters and young sisters as well that see the show and they have a different level of belief because they see proof.
Mhm.
It is maybe harder to achieve than if it were like a blonde, whatever movie, sissy show or whatever, right? Sissy, not in the sense homophobic, but Sissy, the Empress, right? Because we had like the Sissy 100 or 150-year anniversary, and there were like 4 or 5 Sissy movies and series being made. That's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Sissy, the Empress Elizabeth from Austria, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Famous Saxon is harder to be made, but it is possible. It does
Mhm.
exist,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. So you've talked a little bit about who some of the artists that you look to, and many of them were African Americans. You mentioned Denzel Washington. Delroy Lindo is in my head for some reason.
Mm,
He's
yeah.
an amazing actor.
But he's an American. I heard like weeks
What?
ago that he was English or something. I was shocked.
He is, yes. He is English.
Yeah,
British Jamaican, I believe.
yeah, exactly.
Um, so I'm curious about, thinking again of Rekinning in the context of art, performance, filmmaking, theater. Who would you say are some of your sort of, performing and filmic, ancestors, or who is in your lineage, when you think about the kind of artist that you are? I know you mentioned Spike Lee, Lee's work as being important.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I'm a bit under the weather. I'm sorry. Well, I have to say first and foremost Denzel Washington, because it was me watching Training Day
Mm,
that was like the light at the night the bolt hit me. Like after watching Training Day, I pretty much then decided I want to do this. Like that's what I want to do now. And so I have to go with him. when it comes to art, of course, not all of my role models are Black, right? Someone I extremely value and respect and appreciate is Tom Hardy, because he brings a certain, I might say, energy to the screen. His dedication to the craft is tremendous. But then also, when it comes to filmmaking, you gotta love Spike Lee. You have to. Like, you have to appreciate what he has given to the culture, and the way that he has, at times, through hard circumstances, made great pieces of historic Black art. And yeah, who else? There's so many great artists to choose from, but those three definitely are very, very important to me. Tom Hardy more so as someone that I'm chasing in some way. Denzel as the one who was there for the inception of the dream, and then Spike Lee for his, yeah, I might say, continuous filmmaking prowess. Because what I'm facing right now in Germany too is that in Germany I don't feel like it's enough for me to be an actor. I have to write myself. I have to produce myself, similar as we did with Danke. It is very naive to think that this predominantly white industry would now just embrace me overnight, right? Mm-hmm. For me to continue to create productive visibility and good stories, I have to be involved in a deeper way. And yeah, watching Spike Lee, of course, as an author director, yeah, is a tremendous, I must say, tremendous role model. Yeah.
Awesome. We have not a question, but a comment from Oliver Hart, who just wants to express his appreciation and admiration for your work, brother. So, yes.
That's also funny, because that was one of the moments when I realized that I was like destined to play Sam. Oliver Hart, who, of course, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, presented his movie Black Deutschland. Mm-hmm. At the end of his film, the real Samuel Mefire is doing some type of empowerment workshop or something on the island of Norderney, I believe, with some Black German boys who play football in the background. These boys are from my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And they are there with the IAF. I don't know what the abbreviation stands for, but it's like it was something in Bremen where mothers could take their afro-German children to have some type of community, right? And I am only not there probably because at that time there was a lot of turmoil at our household, and maybe therefore me and my mother weren't at that little trip to Northern Ireland. But a lot of boys from my neighborhood are. So much love back to Oliver Hart.
Another question. You have illustrated how African-American actors and actresses, as well as the tragic homicides of Black American citizens, have impacted the German trajectory to reach greater racial representation. And you've talked quite a bit about the Black Lives Matter movement. What do you think Americans can learn from the Afro-European fight to gain equity and equality?
Well, let me give you a very negative example. I don't like the way German hip hop is run and functions. In America, given that you have a stronger demographic, you always have these, I might say, Black productive or necessary gatekeepers. There is no Eminem without Dr. Dre. In Germany, it is very different. In the early 2000s, the major labels suddenly stopped supporting Black artists, and they mainly supported Turkish and Arabic artists with the explanation that they had a bigger market share or a bigger audience to address, which then led to them getting budgets. Some of them, I will leave them unnamed, then started basically headhunting or dissing Black artists who gave them the art form. And they basically stole hip hop in Germany. So something I want the Black audience or the Black artists to severely understand is what they, of course, already do understand is that Black people, especially Black American people, are drivers of culture. But now it becomes important to also participate at full value in the culture, in the sense of owning structures, getting the royalties, owning the masters and whatnot, right? We don't need another Motown situation where you pick up Black boys from the street, right, make them write hits, and then put your name into the credit list and live well off forever while they get back into poverty after giving them a small advance. And Germany pretty much is a very cautionary tale, I believe, of what happens with Black art and Black art forms if there is no respect. And therefore, what I love so much about Black people in general, in Africa or in Ghana especially, we call it the Akwaba mentality, Akwaba meaning welcome. We are very, very welcoming, but at times we maybe need to add some criteria to the invitation.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Can you see yourself behind the camera as well, or in other roles in filmmaking?
Yeah, well, I have been already. And yes, I do. I like to shape narratives. I like to improve on stories, given that I do feel that it's so important to, I'm gonna say, optimize the visibility that is now gained. So yeah, the short answer is yes, I do. But at times, as an actor, what I appreciated so much with Sam Saxon was that I could rest easier, knowing that there were people behind the camera, whether it would be Sulin concerning the direction, or Zara concerning Zara Blaskowitz, our other great director, concerning the direction, whether it would be Iron helping in the writer's room and or the other Black writers, but also Chris Zilber, the husband of a Black woman and father of Black children as a white man, but also Jörg Winger, who has been tremendous when it comes to inclusive storytelling in Germany. Like he hired Tyron in 2005, when that was, I might say, much more risque or, yeah, special maybe than doing something like that now. So knowing that there are people in place behind the camera that get it, and then being able to just focus on the acting is the greatest possible scenario to me. And of course, creating my own narratives. Yeah.
So this is a really, it's a combination of comment and question from Beatrice, and I think a beautiful question comment where you talked about the contributions and experiences of one's life and passing knowledge forward. And she says, like you, I had no book or person that could educate me on how to navigate the road as an Afro-German. At the twilight of my life, I ask, if I knew then what I know now, where would I be? Is it generational knowledge or a path we, under our individual circumstances, follow? Can we move forward without our individual experiences of the past? Are we here now in time and space where we are supposed to be? And thank you for your knowledge and thought-provoking words. I've moved forward once again. So quite a bit here, beautifully said.
Oh yeah, that's a great comment and or question. I'm trying to take my time with this. Sorry, give me a second.
Yeah.
It makes you very emotional, to be honest. I feel more important than happiness is being content, right? And I pray for Beatrice in that case, or in this case, that wherever you wound up makes you content. And when I speak about myself, I always say like this, like I always, especially given that we're talking to American brothers and sisters, and or maybe some African brothers and sisters, like the German poverty experience is one of the better ones because we have a lot of social systems and stuff in place, right?
Mhm.
But I come from German poverty, and that was not fun all the time. But where I wound up now, I'm happy, right? And the problems and pain I faced made me who I am today, and I wouldn't want to change who or what I am today or where I wound up. But still, I don't really remember. I don't want to do an injustice. Maybe someone can type it into the chat. The main problem, there's a great quote, and I don't know if it's Toni Morrison or someone else, but the main problem with racism is that it distracts you from what you could do or who you could be.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's something along those lines. Sorry for butchering.
Yeah.
But that is where the knowledge of the elders becomes so tremendously valuable. And we all wander our path, but we need their rekindling, I believe, for us to at least have the option for guidance and I'm gonna say playbook for this reality that is now cast upon us. Mm. We need that. And if we at times want to make our own experience and ignore that textbook, then it's our choice. Mm-hmm. We will live with that choice, but not having that choice. Like, given what I know the American brothers and sisters to do when it comes to the arts, I don't know if some of the great American Black artist geniuses were potentially born in Germany. What I mean by that is maybe one of those brothers and sisters that we shipped away after the Second World War because we wanted to keep our white German society homogenous, maybe one of them could have been our Beyonce, could have been our Michael Jackson, which then would have made it much easier for the people from the generations before me. Like, we have to really understand the contribution of Michael Jackson to music, television, I might say. And these people got taken out of our German reality. And yeah, maybe those people could have given us great literature like we are gaining now. Like when I look at maybe, for example, Alice Hastas and her great book. And of course, I know brothers and sisters from the generations before, they published books as well. I don't want to diminish them. That is not what I'm trying to do here, but there was a different visibility and or just marketing behind, for example, Alice Hastas' book. I don't know if it was necessarily better than the books from the time before, but if we wouldn't always lose people to contribute to the Afro-German, or if we hadn't always lost people who contributed to the Afro-German experience, maybe stuff could have been amplified earlier. Maybe Sam Saxon would now be the 5th or 10th or whatever Black German-led show. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So to Beatrice, I can only say, I understand the question, or I hope I understand the question, and I hope you're happy with where you wound up. But I want all of us to now build more networks, build more structures, build more infrastructure that is at least, I might say, based in Blackness and or connection for us now to have the access to knowledge more readily available. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, that takes us almost to time. I think the last question we were interested in, and you sort of kind of pivoted towards that. So the question is, what would you like to be doing in 10 years? But I'd like to expand upon that. to ask you to sort of leap 10 years into the future and tell us what you imagine this community might look like and be doing.
Well, 10 years. A lot can be done in 10 years. It's a great line by Jay-Z. Difficult takes a day, impossible takes a week.
Takes a week. Yeah.
Yeah. So 10 years. What do I want this to be? I want this BGHRA and I want me to still be in contact with the great people of the BGHRA and be of service and be at their call whenever I can help and whatever. That is important to me. I want this organization to play a pivotal role in not necessarily forcing it upon anybody, but giving the option to the Black Germans that we lost or that were deported of gaining German citizenship. If they want to have it, they should be able to get it quite easily, I believe. They were born here, they were just taken away. Yeah, and ideally, like, I think it'd be dope if there were like chapters in the sense of the BGHRA having some type of like, it doesn't even necessarily these days have to be in a building, but it has to be like some different chapters, like a chapter of Germany, Berlin or whatever, maybe one of Hamburg, one of Munich, these great hubs, then having, of course, the chapters in America as well. And yeah, us refraining from bickering. There's something that I see in the Black community sometimes where people have their interpretation of activism and they then casting judgment on other people's vision of activism. And I need us all to understand every form of activism is necessary and appreciate each other. And therefore, first and foremost, stay united, grow, and just build structures, I believe, at the end of the day. And I love the idea of Black German Heritage Research Association, but then maybe even expanding it, you know what I'm saying? Like in the sense of then given that there might be some chapters and or fractions of different areas, they then reaching out to the, what's it called? Like the relevant similar organizations of different countries and of continents, right?
Right.
But I feel it like the idea of Pan-Africanism has to be at the center of everything.
Oh, absolutely awesome. Well, thank you, Malick. You've given us a lot, and thank you for projecting into the future. I'm actually really excited to think about those possibilities. And thank you again so much for being in conversation with us. Thank you to our audience who've been wonderful and provided some great questions. And we will see you at the next keynote with Lena Hu.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. Thank you for taking the time out your day, and much love and appreciation for all you guys do over there at the BGHRA. And yeah, love and blessings to all of you.
Thank you. Bye.